This is Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Lamed Vav. Learning for this month, the month of Teves, has been generously sponsored as incredible schos. Alias Nishama for Rav Aryeh ben Rav Ya'akov v'siyata d'shmaya. The koyach hatayra should bring the neshama of Rav Aryeh ben Rav Ya'akov to a higher and higher place in Gan Eden Shalmaila, as well as the learning should be an incredible schos refuah shalema for tinaik ben Miriam ahuva v'siyata d'shmaya. We're holding in the bottom of Lamed Hey Amid Beis, and we're going to go up a little bit, about 10 lines from the bottom. The first line is Maish Vaisechem Amar Abaye. We're in the middle of trying to figure out what is yes Doiche Shabbos, what is not Doiche Shabbos. We segued from there, Amar Abaye. Hashta Damar, now that you have said, Ein Ritzicha Doiche Es Shabbos. Ritzicha, now Ritzicha clearly doesn't mean Ritzicha, let's remind ourselves. Ritzicha means execution. So is Chayim Misa. Beis Din will not execute them on Shabbos. Ein Ritzicha Deiches Avoda. Just like Ritzicha is not Deicha Shabbos, Ritzicha will not be Deicha the Avoda Mikal V'Chayim. What does it mean will not be Deicha the Avoda? Let's remind yourself what that means is that if a Kohen has to do the Avoda in the Beis HaMikdash, Ein Ritzicha Deicha Oisa, performing an execution, Beis Din following through on a din ritzich of sonus chayim misa will not push away the avoda. Says the Gemara, where do we learn this from? Mikal v'chaymer. Uma Shabbos shenitches b'mnei avoda. Shabbos is pushed away from the avoda. Ein ritzicha deicha isa, and yet ritzicha Beis Din in killing someone is not deicha Shabbos. Avoda she deichas a Shabbos. Avoda which pushes away Shabbos. Ein oidein shalotei ritzicha deicha isa. Certainly ritzicha should not push it away. Says the Gemara, Ella hadich siv. That would be the kal v'chaymer that one would have thought. But continues the Gemara, but what do we do? Ella hadich siv. That which we learned in the pasuk me'im bizbechi tikachenu lamaves. That which the pasuk says that from near me'im nizbechi, from near my mizbeach tikachenu, you should take him lamaves, to death. From there it shows that that the avodah is yes overridden by Ritzicha. Says Gemara, you know what we're going to do with that pasuk? Ahule karban yachid deloy dachi Shabbos. That's only talking about a karban yachid. So now we've expanded our din of when is the avodah dachi Shabbos, and the Gemara is explaining to us that it's only avodah of the tzibur. A karban tzibur is dachi Shabbos. Again, that means you can do the shchit, you can do all the malachais on Shabbos for a karban sibur. However, a karban yachid is not doiche Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava argues on this din of Abaye. Karban yachid mikal v'chaymer. Says Rava, if you are correct, and you know we should learn out that Ritzicha does not override a karban even of a yachid, not like you just said. Mikal v'chaymer. As we turn over to Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, says the Gemara, what is the kal v'chaymer? What is Rava's kal v'chaymer? Ma yantiv. Just like yantiv shenitcha with a karban yachid, a karban yachid does push away. So again, we just learned that in Shabbos is not pushed away for karban yachid. But says the Gemara in yantiv it is, and yet Ein Ritzicha Deicha Isai. Ritzicha does not push away the dinim of Yantiv. Karban Yachid Shehu Deicha is a Yantiv. Karban Yachid, which is yes Deicha Yantiv. Ein Oidein Shlatei Ritzicha Deicha Isai. So Rava argues on Abaye, and Rava says, don't tell me that a karban Yachid is yes overridden by Ritzicha, because we see on Yantiv that is not the way. Continues the Gemara, says Rav, it's good according to Manda Amar that says Ein Nidarim Unudavos Krivim B'Yantif. It's good according to Manda Amar that says that Nidavos are not brought on Yantif. Why are they not brought on Yantif? Because they are considered a karban yachid, and therefore there's no kal v'chaymer. Elamanda Amar, that would be fine. But according to the opinion that says Naran beyond my Meimar, says Rava, what are you gonna say? We have a Kavachimer again, Nachamol, as we just Rava's Kasha is on Abaya, teaching that Ritzicha should not override Karban Yachid. But the pasuk says that we do override with regarding to Nidarim Unidavais. So Elam Rava, so Rava says Abaya, you are incorrect. Why? The reason is because they're not going to learn anything from Mizbechi. Says the Gemara, we're going to learn out in a new drasha. Mizbechi hamiyuchad li. It's from my Mizbeach that is a miyuchad, that is special to me. What is that? What is in me, the Mizbeach, which is miyuchad? Lemi umay niu tamid. That's going to be the Karban Tamid, which of course we know the Karban Tamid is going to be a Karban Sibur. And the Torah says, and on that the Torah says, so since we could learn that this pasuk is teaching us that the Ritzicha, yes, pushes away even a Karban Sivar, so we don't have the Kal V'Chaimer anymore, and therefore when Abaye said that the Ritzicha does not push away the Karban Sivar, it is not a Kasha. Let's take a moment to look at Rashi. Rashi over here, Ella Amar Rava, Rashi about 8 lines into the narrow lines, says Rashi, let's just learn how Rashi learns up Rava's teretz of the Gemara. Al Karchach Asmi Mizbechi. It must be learning from Mizbechi V'Akre LeKal V'Chaimer. And the pasuk, yes, is coming at odds and is coming to uproot the Kal V'Chaimer. Bein mekarben yachid, bein mekarben tzibur. This is Rava's pshat. Why? Delaimi by lemandam krivim. To keep the karben yachid deiches yamtiv. Iasi lemidrash Kal V'Chaimer loimitukim mizbechi klal. Then, if we return the Kal V'Chaimer, the pasuk of mizbechi would be teaching us nothing. Val karchach loisidrash Kal V'Chaimer. So, you can't have a Kal V'Chaimer. And the pasuk Rava Akri El afilu manda amar. Even according to the other mandamar that holds it's in a krivim biyantiv, vikaluk mi lekra bekarben yachid leko Kal V'Chaimer ubekarben siber loimi by look mi lekra mishum Kal V'Chaimer. So al karchach. So what are you gonna have to learn the pasuk? Mi mashmuusay mi tukim nami bekarben siber, meaning the original havamina. We're coming back to saying that yes, the pasuk is talking about a Karban Simer. The Mizbechi mashma hamiyuchali dahainu. What is Mizbechi? Why is it a singular Mizbechi? My Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, that's referring to a very specific type of Karban. Dahainu tamid, which is what? Shu ikar kol karbana. So that was the line we were looking for. Rashi's throwing in a little bit of an extra tidbit over here, more than the Gemara says. The Gemara just says Mizbechi. So about the tamid, which one could have said, maybe because it's a Karban Tzibur, maybe it's because it's a daily Karban. Rashi says the Talmud is the Iker of all the Karbanis. We continue about 15 lines in the Gemara. Tine Mamanis Atumeois Vatahairois, quoting the din in the Mishnah, that how do we begin the deliberations? We have all the Dayanim sitting there. Who speaks first? We see how we choreograph perfectly the Dine Taira. So the Mishnah taught us that we begin from the most chashiv. Why? Because he gets covered. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav, comes along Rav, Ana Havai b'minyana, Devei Rabbi, I was there in the minyan, I was there in the bezdin of Rabbi, Umenoi Didi, Have Mitchali Bereisha. And says Rav, they began from me. Says the Gemara, wait, V'ana Matchilim and I gadol tonight. But we learn we should begin from the gadol. And Rav was not the gadol in Rabbi's bezdin. Clearly it's Rabbi's bezdin, not Rav's bezdin. So why is it that Rav is the one that's opening up first? Amar Rabba, says Rabba Brei de Rava, V'itema Rabbi Hillel Brei de Rabbi Valos, Shiny Minyana de Rabbi de Kulu Minyana Minatzad. Rabbi's bezdin had a different practice. By Rabbi, they always began Min Asad Havi Mitchali. In all dinim, whether it was dinim nefashos, whether it's dinim mamanis, in the bezdin of Rabbi, they always began Min Atzad from the lower tier dayanim, and that is the read indeed that Rav was the one that asked to talk first. Says the Gemara, once we're on the topic of something said by Rabbi, continues the Gemara, Amar Rabba, Braid Rava Vitema Rabbi Hillel, Braid Rabbi Vilas. Again, once we have one memra said by them, we go to a next. Says the Gemara. A very famous memra that from the days of Moshe Rabbeinu until Rebbe, we have not found the Torah Gedula in one place. Says the Gemara, really? We haven't found Torah Gedula b'makam echad. Now, before we go weiter, let's just see Rashi. Rashi explains what does it mean b'makam echad. Rashi says, Torahsan ugdulasan shal Yisrael b'adam echad. She'ein kamaise b'chol Yisrael b'Torah. What it means is that he is the greatest in Torah u'b'gedula. Kegoin Moshe, she'gadol al kol Yisrael b'malchus u'b'Torah. Chen Rebbe was gadol b'nesiyas u'b'Torah. Says the Gemara, is this true? V'loi, what about Avi Yeshua? Answers the Gemara, no. When Yeshua was alive, Havi Elazar, and Elazar was equal to Yeshua in Torah. V'Havi Pinchas, Havi Zekenim, V'Havi Shaul, Havi Shmuel. Says the Gemara, V'Nach Navshei. But they were not nifter all at the same time. Shmuel died while Shaul was still the Melech. Therefore, there was a moment that Shaul was both the Gadol b'Torah u'b'Gedula. Says we're now Kuli Shnei Kamrinan. We're talking about all his years. That is what we refer to, that Loi Matzinu Torah Gedula b'Makam Echad. Continues the Gemara. What do you mean? V'Avi David. What about David? Who, when he was in his reign, he was the Gadol b'Torah b'Gedula. Answers the Gemara, no, there's Iri, who there were stories in Nach that David deferred to him in Torah. Says the Gemara of Avi Shloimei. What about Shlomo Melech? Shlomo Melech was Gadol b'Torah b'Gedula. Answers the Gemara, no. Havi Shimi ben Gera. V'Katlei. Says the Gemara, but Shimi ben Gera was executed by Shlomo Melech. Answers the Gemara, Kuli Shnei Karminanu means all his days. Havi Chizkiah, Havi Shimne, Va'iktil, Shimne was killed, Kuli Shnei Karminan. Vavi Ezra, so what about Ezra? Havi Nechemia ben Chaklaya. Amar Rav Ada Barava, continues Rav Ada Barava, Fani Oimer, I as well say, Mimais Rabbi, Ad Rav Ashi, Lemetinu Torah Gdula b'Makam Echad. So now we're extending our memra. We began with Moshe ad Rebbe. We haven't found Torah Gdula b'Makam Echad. Continues the Gemara that from the times of Rav Ashi, Lei Matzinu Torah Gdula b'Makam Echad. Continues the Gemara, really, V'loi v'ha Rav Huna bar Nasan. Huna bar Nasan, Mekav Avikayev Leila Rav Ashi. Huna bar Nasan was not the greatest. He was subordinate to Rav Ashi, and therefore he was not considered the Gadol b'Torah u'b'Gedula. Continues the Gemara, 12 lines from the bottom, going back to the Mishnah. Tine nefashais matchilem min hatzad. Tine nefashais, in contrast to Dine Mamadis that we just spoke to. Dine Mamadis we just said, matchilem min hagedula. Tine nefashais, says the Gemara, we begin min hatzad. We begin not from the Gadol. Says the Gemara, where do we know this from? Our Ravacha bar Papa, says the Pasik, Loisa'ane al Riv. Says the Pasik, do not respond to a Riv, to an argument. And we darsh in the Pasik, Loisa'ane al Rav. Don't respond to someone greater than you. Rabbi Rav Chana Amar Rav Yechon Me'acha, V'yemar la Anasha v'chagroi ishes charboi v'achgroi ishes charboi. David HaMelech told his people, everyone grab your swords, and everyone grabbed their swords, and V'yacher gam David es charboi, and David did the same. So again, we see from over here that the David also took up his sword. From there we learn that David offered his opinion after the other Dayanim. So we see that even though David HaMelech was there, clearly it wasn't Matchilim and Agadol, we rather started Min Hatzad. Continues the Gemara, 6 lines on the bottom, Amar Rav, Shaine Adam L'Talmidai, says Rav, a person should teach his Talmidim, V'dani Mai B'dinin Nefashais, and judge it along with him, teach the Talmud, and then sit together with the Talmud and educate the case together with him. Meaning, Chiddush being, even though you just taught him the halachis, let's look at Rashi. Rashi speaks it out at the end of the narrow lines. b'toich adin, v'dani mai, v'nimna yimai, oy lezchos oy lechayva. Umatin adin al bi atalmid kechem and adayanim. Even though the Talmud was just told what to do, we count him like one of the dayanim. Meisvei asked the Gemara 1 second, 4 lines in the bottom. Atorah is vatamei ois. Ha'avu b'naya ravu talmidai. Moinim lahem. By Tumatayra, father, son, teacher, Talmud. Moinim lahem shnayim. We counted as 2 people. But dinei mamin is dinei nefasha is dinei mak is kiddush hachodesh ber hashana. Avu b'naya ravu talmidai. Ein moinim lahem elech. Ask the Gemara, I don't understand. You just told me that what? You teach the Talmud and you count him. But we see here that that's not true. We see here by some cases it's true, but by the bulk of Dinei Torah, we do not count him as a separate vote. Rather, the Avu B'nai Ravu Talmidai is counted as 1. Continues the Gemara as we turn over to Lamed Vav, Amid Beis, Ki Ka'amar Rav. When did Rav say Ezekiel and Rav Kahana Rav Asi? Deligmere derav have tzrichi a chiddush. Rav Kana and Rav Asi, they only needed the dinim of Rav. However, ulismere derav lo avi tzrichi. So the Gemara is explaining that we're discussing a unique type of Talmud. We're not discussing a Talmud that doesn't know or a Talmud that's not on the level. So as a Talmud like Rav Kana and Rav Asi, then in reality, misavara, they're on the same level. Elamai, let's remember, all of Torah wasn't written down. They had to learn from a Rebbe. So they needed Rav to teach them the info. Okay, but then once they did, then they were able to be considered on the level of the Rebbe. Continues the Gemara, now that we've seen many differentiations between Dinin Nefashis and Dinin Mamanis, Amar Rav Avua, Sarah Devarim, Yesh Bein Dinin Mamanis, the Dinin Nefashis, we have 10 different Dinim, Vekulan, all them, Ein Noyhagin B'Shar HaNiskol. All these differences are not relevant to a shar, an ox that is to be stoned, the chutz, aside for Me'esrim V'Shleisha, except for the one din being, as we learned back in the first parak, the din, the requirement needing 23 dayanim, that for the fact of the smichos aparishis, we learned back in Daf Beis, that a shar and niskal will require the same bezdin, the same number of dayanim, like any other capital crime, 23 dayanim. Says the Gemara, Minani Mili, 6 lines down, but where do we know this? Amar Ravacha bar Baba, Diamar Kira, says the Torah Loisata Mishpat Evyoincha Berivoi. Says the Pasuk, do not mess up the judgment of the poor person when he's fighting. So what do we learn out from over here? Learn out from over here, we cannot convict someone of Dinin Nefashis, as we learned back in the first parak, if there's a majority of only one person. Mishpat Evyoincha Yatamate. But you could indeed tilt the vote of a shar niskal by one vote, by one person. So says the Gemara, that's going to be the unique halacha of the shar haniskal. But says the Gemara, 1 second. Rav Avua taught us that how many differences were there between Din Nefashis and Din Mamanis? Rav Avua taught us there were 10. Says the Gemara, Asara? What? There's really only 9. Says the Gemara, what's your kasha? The Mishnah said 10. Answers the Gemara, the differences are the only 9 because that Eina Kol Kesherim to done such cases which excludes a mamzer, the Esrim Vishleisha Chadahi, and the Allah for 23 are all the same Makar. The Makar, they have to be a kosher yid. The Makar, they need 23, both come from the same place. And therefore says the Gemara, it's not really 10. Maybe there's 10 applications, but it's only 9 dinim. Says the Gemara, 1 second. There's another person who is not allowed to judge such a case, even though he could, yes, judge dinim mamanis. Titania, ein meishivim is Sanhedrin zakin usris, mishein loibanim. Such a person is not allowed to be part of the Sanhedrin. Rav Yehuda Moisef, Af Achzari, even says Rav Yehuda, even Achzari is someone who's cruel, v'chilufeim b'mesis. However, the opposite is true regarding a mesis, one who instigates someone to worship idols. Rachmana Amar says the Torah loisachmil, v'loisachazal, do not pity him, do not cover for him, and therefore says the Gemara, that's why indeed there are 10. We continue about 15 lines down to the two dots, quoting the next segment, the second last segment of the Mishnah. Ha'kol ksherin ladun dine mamnis. Says the Gemara, Ha'kol asuyimai. The classical kasha, what does Ha'kol come to include? Amar Rav Yehuda la'asuyei mamzer. Comes to include a mamzer, that even a mamzer is allowed to dan dine mamnis. Asks the Gemara, 1 second, why do we need our Mishnah to teach that? We had a Mishnah. But says the Mishnah, and what is that? What is this unique case of someone who's rayu to dan dinim mamzer is not dinim vashas? V'avina ba la'asuyim ai v'amar Rav Yehuda la'asuyim mamzer. So says the Gemara, why did our Mishnah have to say hakol la'asuyim the mamzer? But we already had it elsewhere. Answers the Gemara, Chada la'asuyim ger, Chada la'asuyim mamzer. No, two different cases. One is coming la'asuyim ger, and one is a suyim mamzer. Usricha. Diashminan ger, I would have thought, why is a ger allowed to be a dayan? The role you love a bikal. Aval mamzer, the unique halacha, emaloi. Diashminan mamzer. And if it only taught us halacha of a mamzer, I would have thought, why? Debami tipak sheira. Lemaisa. There's tipak sheira. Lemaisa, the parents at some level kashus, meaning they were yidden. Just the union was illegal. But it is kosher. Aval ger d'lo mitipak sheira emaloi. Sricha. Therefore, that's why we need two different mishnayos to teach this halacha. And we conclude with one last halacha for the end of the Mishnah. Kol ksherim lo din nefashis. Said the Mishnah, not everyone is kosher to dan dine nefashis. Says the Gemara, my time. What's the reason that Ani Rav Yosef kishem? Just like shebezdin menukim b'tzedek kach menukim mekolmam. Just like Bezdin has to be menuka, has to be free from any lack of tzedek, it has to be perfectly sitkos, righteousness. Kach, so too, menuka mikol mum, Bezdin has to be free from any mum. Amar Amaimar, Micro, what it's in this pasuk, kulcha yafe rayasi, umum ein bach. Says the pasuk, I think it's Shir Hashirim, kulcha yafe mayasi, umum ein bach. But dilma mum mamish, says Rameh means an actual mum, not a mum in yichos. Amar Rav Ya'akov, Amar Kravis, Yatzu Sham Imach. Says the pasuk, the Moshe Rabbeinu says he should stand with you. Imach v'day melach similar to you. I v'dom lahasam Moshe Rabbeinu misham shchina. A special halach ben Abi Obat Edinim. Elmer Nachman Yitzchak Amar Kras says the pasuk v'nasu itach v'day min lach you. From that actual pasuk, that's we learn out that a kol kashem not in nefashais. But it has to be someone who's not only menuk, the bed's not only is menuk but tzedek, but also menukim from any movement in yichas. We'll pick it up from the Mishnah b'siyata dishmai.